Most of what I'm going to present today is writing a letter to the editor of a newspaper. However, this can include leaving online comments attached to an article, sending a letter to online and physical magazines, leaving Google reviews of businesses, or calling a business to give feedback. Here are 4 main areas I'm going to be talking about. A little bit about me, my LTE process, writing a LTE, and LTEs create social change. During my younger years in public schools, writing was intimidating, uncomfortable, and I just did not like to read books. I dreaded doing book reports, so I would look for the smallest books with the largest font. During my years in college, English and writing was still challenging, but more enjoyable because learning to write was an outlet for my physical disability. I'm a C5 quadriplegic with paralysis from the neck down since 1996. This is a cool picture of me in my manual rugby chair. In 2012, my writing skills began to improve when I started to receive an education to be an alcohol and drug counselor. As an alcohol and drug counselor from 2014 to 2019, I wrote several hundred substance use evaluations for individuals, which needed to be written with an objective, factual writing style. There is only a small section in these evaluations entitled Clinical Impression, where I could leave my professional opinion, but it still avoided absolutes or certainties. I became a full-time animal rights vegan activist as a volunteer changemaker captain with the Humane League in September of 2019. In this position, I put off writing LTEs because I didn't want to write. Instead, I was looking for a leader to do it. I didn't find anyone to write and was receiving pressure from my field organizer to at least start writing until I could find someone. So I started to write LTEs as a volunteer changemaker captain and successfully published my first one on November 2nd, 2019. As of date, I have had LTEs published in 10 different newspaper publications across Nebraska for a total of 73 times. My LTE process. First off, the process I will be sharing may sound like a lot of work, but I like to put work in initially so as to make each letter I write to be smoother and faster and to be printed without any errors. Since going vegan on December 4th, 2015, I continually notice or come across different vegan-related studies, stories, or resources, which has had me create different folders to access information of a particular subject when it is relevant. Folder names such as hunting, farming, biodiversity, carbon footprint, arts, vegan startup sites, health, social justice, and thought-provoking quotes. This way, no matter what the subject is important to people in their lives, you can provide legit, convincing information showing a vegan lifestyle choice complements their professed values and morals. In my vegan LTE folder, I have saved hyperlinks to all Nebraska daily newspapers for easy access to submit a letter or to check if they have published my letter. I list the newspapers which have been dead ends to either take note to not waste my time with these newspapers or to challenge me to get into these papers. What I mean by dead ends is an author who has never published one of my LTEs and doesn't respond to even the emails or phone calls. I list every newspaper's restrictions, such as word count. Some newspapers, the word count is as low as 250, some go up to 350 or more. Some newspapers have a restriction that if the LTE you submit, it cannot be submitted to any other newspapers for print consideration. This is important to think about because I may want to send my LTE to several Nebraska newspapers to increase the likelihood of at least someone printing something. Also, if your LTE is printed, all newspapers have a 30 to 45 day wait restriction period so that you cannot submit LTE until after that expires. The list of names of editors I will be submitting LTEs to include phone numbers, emails, etc. This doesn't mean you have to gather all this information at once. Just do it as it arises. For example, let's say a newspaper is not publishing your LTE, and you give them a call. During this call, you find out their name. So record this. I write down the date I submitted the LTE, which newspaper, and the LTE content sent. It's important you save the LTE content because sometimes the editor will leave out information or reword it. This will help you write LTEs that are easily more print-worthy to that particular editor. I believe the less work an editor has to do on a submitted LTE, the more likely it will be chosen for print. I list the date my LTE was accepted because I will not be able to qualify for another print for 30 to 45 days, and as soon as I can, I'll look to submit another one. Writing an LTE. You can write an LTE in response to another newspaper article by identifying the name of the article, the name of the newspaper section, and date. I give many details so the editor can easily find it. Sometimes minimize these details if this information is going against your word count. Also, if you do not have a regular subscription to a newspaper, like myself, you can view newspapers online. Sometimes newspapers have temporary online deals for like $1. Sometimes I write an LTE from my own vegan activism writings, from perhaps a response I had given someone on Facebook or someone I was communicating with by text or even by inspirational readings. Sometimes I write an LTE in association to a nonprofit animal rights organization, campaign, or calendar observance. When I write LTEs, I don't think about the word count, but first, the quality. I'm getting better at using objective language. I have improved my language use after reading books by Dr. Melanie Joy. I believe it's important to write to your audience like they have an 8th grade education. This is not implying that they're dumb. There is a lot to learn about being vegan, so being simple to create the curiosity for them to at least start looking into it is probably going to be more promising. Watch out for plagiarism, which is using a quote from another writer but using it as if it originated by you. I'm pretty sure I have been guilty of this in one of my letters, which I didn't notice until it went into print. Accidents do happen. Use questions to allow the reader to answer and entice curiosity so they personally check it out for more information. If you are going to voice your opinion, make sure you own it by stressing your opinion rather than a fact or absolute. So instead of, open quote, this is how it is, close quote, open quote, this is fact, close quote, open quote, there's no other way, close quote, open quote, this is the truth, close quote, try using, open quote, I would like to believe, close quote, open quote, in my opinion, close quote, open quote, from what I can tell, it appears, close quote, open quote, this is a truth, close quote. Use creditable sources and cite within the LTE. A creditable source is about learning about the weaknesses and strengths of these sources. While you are doing this, use critical thinking skills. Communicate to your reader as if it was someone you love. Better yet, possess a genuine love for people and communicate in a way you believe is in their best interest to understand. You accomplish this by practicing integrity, which has 3 components of curiosity, compassion, and empathy. That last sentence was from Melanie Joy. After you write a LTE, but before you submit it to a newspaper, please let a friend who can provide constructive criticism read it and give their opinion for editing. I have also suggested in the past to put the letter aside for up to 1 week because when you initially write something, you're writing it with a writer's perspective, thinking you are effectively communicating specific points to a reader. However, if after you finish an LTE and not look at it for up to a week, when you go back to read it again, you are now reading it with a reader's perspective, and you may notice how your use of words were not sufficient to communicate what you wanted the reader to get out of your writing. Here's a small example. Let's say you write a note to yourself, and 1 week later you go to read that note, and you're like, what the heck was I trying to say? First choice, have a friend read it. If that's not possible, and it's very important you get this letter submitted, reread it slowly, word for word. Also, you can use ChatGPT. So it's very important you explain it very well to ChatGPT. For example, you tell ChatGPT, can you please check this writing for any writing errors without affecting the authorship? If you put that notation, that way it's not going to completely fabricate what you wrote, and you're still staying true to yourself, and you're staying true to the newspaper, that what you are submitting is what you created. Okay, now we can start checking your word count and make corrections to be accepted in the newspaper. Okay, so before I start showing you how to submit a letter to the editor on an online newspaper, I'm going to share with you Google Alerts. So in the search engine, the Google search engine, you can just type Google Alerts or any search engine really. And then it's going to bring up this Google Alerts. When you click on it, you're not going to have anything in your alerts because this is your first time here, most likely. But you can create an alert by typing it into this field here and clicking enter. Once an alert is posted, you can go through and edit it. For example, this alert is aligned from my newspaper. Does the newspaper you are reading have an opinionated section? That is, and then of course there's more to it. Can't read it, but I'll be flagged. I'll get like a email showing that this exact paragraph or sentence was printed. So then that most likely means I got an LTE printed somewhere. So you can change things like how often you want to be alerted. I put as it happens. There's things like at most once a day or at most once a week. I do it as happens because I want to find out right away. You can check what language, region. There's a world region. I don't usually submit anything outside of United States, so I keep it to United States. And I do all results so I can see a lot of different options. So that's how you do Google Alerts. Now we'll jump over here to Norfolk Daily News. And as you can see, there's 3 lines over here. So if you click on these, you can type in your name here and then click search, which I've already done that. So it brings up all the LTEs that I have ever published in the Norfolk Daily News. Right down the middle there, you see public awareness, innovation suffocated, choice belongs to the people. All those are LTEs that I got printed here at Norfolk. So that's how you can check if your letters were printed. Another thing you can do is you can go to a letter to the editor like this one, and there's these voice boxes. You can click on that and just leave a comment. So you can comment on my LTE or other people's LTEs. I'd suggest doing both, commenting on LTE and then submitting it to your editor, an editor, to see if they'll print it. Now I'll show you how to submit an LTE to your newspaper. Most newspapers have a column that's going to say submit an LTE. This one does not, but at the very bottom, it has a submit button. So you click on this submit button, it brings you to this page where it gives you all these different options. We're looking for letter to the editor. We simply click on that, brings up this page, has all these fields that you have to enter that are a must, that have all those red asterisks on them. So you enter your name, your address, all that. Here's where you enter your type of your letter. So that's how you do it. All right, back to the presentation. The next several slides, I'm going to give examples of subjective language and how to turn it into objective language. The subjective word tortured. Using the word tortured is subjective and can be turned into objective language by simply describing the accepted standard animal farming practices. Many people reading this subjective language could then form their own opinion, and likely it could be a word such as tortured. Greedy killers or careless polluters are subjective examples of opinionated name-calling. When people actually learn the facts of what's going on in these factory farms, they themselves may form a name-calling opinion. You lose professional credibility when you start calling people names, because then people think you're emotional rather than rational with facts. Go to Google Alerts to enter specific words and phrases to be notified if your LTE was published, or to be notified for story opportunities for a future LTE. You can also go to the online newspaper and search your name. If it gets published, you will not be notified by the newspaper. Wait 3 to 4 days after submitting your letter and then follow up with the editor. Don't be shy to call the newspaper and identify yourself. Give them information to locate the letter. Ask them if they thought it was complete, sound, and worthy of print. If they do not like it or they will not print it, ask them if they could give their professional opinion on how you might improve the letter. Be sincere. and thank them for their time. You could easily have to wait 1 to 3 weeks before the letter gets published. Create a genuine, simple, civil relationship. On the right here, this is an example of an email exchange between myself and the editor of the Grand Island Independent newspaper in Nebraska. This individual is the only one who actually personally responds back to every LTE submission I send in. Unfortunately, it seems like you cannot control the title given to your letter, and so you could submit a letter to 3 different newspapers, and depending on how the editor felt after reading it is usually indicated in the title they place on your letter. Sometimes I don't really like these titles, but I'm glad that they may have felt that way. For example, reading through my LTEs, you'll see the following titles given to the same letter. Loving animals yet eating them is hypocrisy. Taste doesn't have to suffer on a healthy vegan diet. And finally, injustice for animals. Once the letter is published, consider calling and thanking them. Post the link to your letter on social media. Now let's talk about how LTEs create social change. Letters to the editor appear in a public forum that many community members, including casual readers, trust. People get caught up in the habitual normalcy of their hand-me-down behaviors that they don't even realize their actions may be unjust and fueling unnecessary violence. So a LTE can introduce an issue people have never thought about. Reframe how an issue is perceived or correct misinformation. A well-written letter to the editor can be the source of providing and allowing a different perception. A small example of correcting misinformation is when animal farmers repeatedly say they are feeding the world. We can provide a letter to the editor showing that there are smaller percentages of animal proteins actually feeding the world compared to plant proteins. Letters to the editor act as public persuasion, sparking conversations at work, online, and in local communities. I believe the more a subject is shared and talked about, the more it becomes digestible and accepted. Elected officials and their staff monitor local newspapers closely to understand what their constituents care about. Several letters on the same topic can signal a growing concern. I think this is most effective if there are a variety of authors submitting letters. I also think when people read letters about animal consideration, it gives them permission to write similar supportive letters to the editor. Policymakers may reference public opinion to justify action. LTEs can encourage readers to contact officials directly. They serve as public pressure indicators. LTEs amplify local voices, especially in smaller communities. In local or regional newspapers, letters often have more weight. Community members often know each other, which increases credibility. Editors may follow up with reporters and turn LT issues into full stories. They are accessible activism. Not everyone can organize rallies, lobby, or fund campaigns. Letters are low to no cost, accessible, democratic. A single letter can inspire others to speak up, creating momentum. LTEs become part of the public record. Letters often rank highly online, get shared on social media, and are archived. They build long-term visibility for an issue. They influence future researchers, activists, and journalists. You too have probably posted a quote from someone on your social media platform. So realize you are able to have this because of it being part of public record. LTEs help movements demonstrate consistent concern over time. That's it. Thank you.